Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Chris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is Nick Wright. Chris Broussard is filling in for Chris Carter, who is out all week. What's up, guys?
Good morning. Got a great show today. Got a ton of guests, including someone you know well and I've only admired from afar, Mike Fratello. I've never met him.
Great coach. He was the first NBA coach I covered when I was a Cavaliers beat writer back in 1995.
Wow.
And he taught me about the game. I was a young know-it-all reporter, so I thought I knew everything. But
is there any other kind?
So, he's on the show. Our friend Eric Mangini's on the show.
On the show. We're talking some college basketball.
Right. We got a lot to do today. Very exciting.
All right. Well, let's start with the game last night. Just when you thought it was impossible for the best player in basketball to make yet more basketball history, LeBron James. That's it, just LeBron James. But on a night when LeBron became the first player ever to reach 30,000 points, 8,000 assists, and 8,000 rebounds, the rest of the team, well, they weren't so great. Cavs beat the Nets, but barely, 129-123, in a game that featured 9 ties, 25 lead changes. Can I remind you they played the Nets? We're going to get to LeBron's milestone later, but Chris Broussard, let me start with you. Yesterday, y'all kind of laughed a little bit when I was like, well, they're playing the Nets. You're like, all right, so they're barely playing. Should we be worried at all about the fact that this team barely beat Brooklyn?
No, not at all. Look, I've covered the NBA 22 years, and what you learn over time is that a win is a win in the regular season. It may not look great, but you get that W and you can learn from the mistakes that you made. I mean, Golden State lost to Sacramento earlier in the season. Any given night, anything can happen.
Well, Golden State has another gear. They know it. Everyone knows it.
And Cleveland's coming together, and they also have an all-star player sitting on the bench in Kevin Love, who's coming back. So nothing to worry about, but there are some things they need to improve on. There's no question. The offense was great. They only took 24 three-pointers. I feel like they were watching First Things First all week saying, Broussard's got a good point. No, look, I love shooting the three, but just don't be over-reliant on it. They've got other things they can do, and they did that yesterday.
And by the way, to your point that they weren't over-reliant on it, they only shot 24. Despite making 12 of them.
Yes.
They were shooting well from three, and they still had a more diverse offense, and their offense, as you were mentioning, was great. The offense was not the problem last night.
It was, as you said, the defense, and I think ultimately it was good for them to kind of get their comeuppance, if you will, defensively. The Nets, 26th best offense in the league, but shot 53% against the Cavs. The Cavs' numbers since the trade on the defensive end have been very good. From a worst team in the league defensively, or one of the worst, to 9th best in defensive rating, 4th best in opponents' field goal percentage. It was looking good defensively, but when you really analyzed it, their opponents were getting a lot of open shots and missing them. Last night, the Nets converted those open shots, and that's what made it a game. So now the Cavaliers can realize, look, just having energy, just having young players is not enough defensively. We have to get our rotation shored up. We have to, communicate. We have to play smart on the defensive end and hustle. And I think ultimately it'll be good for them because they can pick it up on that end of the floor.
The reason you have more reason for optimism regarding their defense, aside from the numbers post All-Star break, and again, very small sample size, numbers post-trade, very small sample size, is because they look just the guys out there are longer and more athletic, and there is not a single guy out there anymore, such as Isaiah Thomas or even to a degree Kyrie Irving last year, that you felt like, well, the other team's just going to target that player to go after him. Now, obviously, Kyrie more than made up for it on the offensive end. Isaiah Thomas couldn't, one of the reasons he was traded. So there's reason to be optimistic about their defense, but the general lethargy that you saw pre-All-Star break has gone away. However, the lack of attention to detail, I think you alluded to it. They were giving up open shots. I've watched every Cavs game this year. Before the trades, they looked like they didn't care. Post-trade, they look like they care on defense, but at times they didn't exactly know what they were doing. That on a pick and roll, both guys switch, or one guy switch, one guy doesn't. And so you saw last night when the Cavs mid-fourth quarter seemed like they were maybe going to get some separation. There was a play where there was a pick and roll, LeBron and I believe it was George Hill. They both went with the pick, with the guy setting the screen. The guy with the ball was like, okay, I'll just back up and shoot this three. So there's some lack of communication. But offensively, they were extraordinary. And I know it's the Nets, but still, their bench scored 56 points, 21 of 36 from the field for their bench, which is outstanding. Also, the Cavs, one note from last night's game that continued, which is curious, and I wonder how long they can keep this going. 28 times this year they've led entering the fourth quarter. They're 28-0 in those games. So they are a team that right now, I think they've lost something like 17 straight when trailing entering the fourth quarter. But if they have a lead, they have not yet blown a fourth quarter lead or a lead going into the fourth. It was close last night. The Nets took a lead with a couple minutes left. Cavs were able to overcome it.
The miscommunication on the pick and roll, the defense kind of coming up short, isn't that a lot to do with just cohesion with these new guys?
Yeah,
and
no question.
Is that the kind of thing where we talk about their offense, and the more these guys get to know each other, their offense is going to get better? Can your defense get better as your chemistry gets better?
Oh, yeah, no question.
Or is there more involved, more factors involved
Chemistry is
in that?
very important on the defensive end.
How?
Communication.
How is chemistry
just because
correlated to
good defensive team, it's not even mainly about having a great individual defender. It's about your team defense, because everybody's going to get beat at times by great offensive players, but your other teammates need to make up for you, have the right rotation. So that will improve over time. I do want to get to the offense a little bit, though. You mentioned the bench with 56 points. They are going to begin to have to look at something with J.R. Smith. J.R. Smith, we know he's been streaky throughout this season and really through the bulk of his career. The last 3 games, he's had 11 points on 18% shooting, 4 for 22. He's not a tremendous defender. He's okay. He was really good compared to what they had with all the old guys they traded. But he's not like a tremendous defender. If he's not hitting shots, that's a problem. I think Rodney Hood at this stage of their careers is better. And I think you got Clarkson coming off the bench. You've got Nance coming off the bench. You might have to, I think they seriously are going to have to look at putting Rodney Hood in that starting lineup. Will JR be bothered to finish? Maybe.
Well, keep in mind,
and I hate to do that, but come on.
I don't think you have to worry about JR being bothered, because if you remember, JR was playing so poorly earlier in the year. He went to Ty Lue and said, you should take me out of the starting lineup. And Ty Lue said, we're not going to do that. So JR suggested.
You think he'll be cool?
So I think he would be okay with it.
There is a school of thought that when D-Wade was initially the starter, that ruffled,
it did ruffle. I think both things are true. I think when D-Wade was initially the starter, it was true. However, once JR became the starter again, and then he was going through one of the worst stretches of his career, he talked about it when he had the good 2-week stretch. You know what I mean? Because it was
I'm through that.
right before the trade deadline, and then through the trade deadline and after, he was playing the best basketball he's played in 2 seasons. But the reality for JR is, it is now, and I said yesterday, he's outside of LeBron, he's my favorite guy on the team. He's the only guy on the team that I feel like I know personally at least a little bit. Not the way you know these guys, but to a degree. I really like JR. And I justified how he played last year because he was dealing with a potentially tragic personal situation. Not only an injury, but he had a baby born extremely prematurely that they didn't know if the child was going to make it. Baby was in the hospital for months during the season. And so I said, listen, you're a human being. Like, your mind is not going to be with the team when you're dealing with that. Well, thankfully, God bless, the child is in great shape. I believe his wife's pregnant again. His family's in great shape. He's recovered from the injury. And he's been bad this year. He has been one of the least productive 2 guards in basketball.
No question.
And so you thought that maybe once he realized he got the amnesty on the trade deadline, I'm not being traded, that, he's turning a corner. But it's back to the low level of production. Now they do have a capable guy to replace him. But it's another guy in the starting lineup as well. And this guy's not going to be criticized because anything you get from him is a bonus. But you can't be starting Jetty Osman come the playoffs. Now, he's a placeholder for Kevin Love. You assume that, the reason he's there is because he knows when Kevin Love comes back, he will take that spot. But JR going out of the starting lineup is a real possibility. The reason they've been able to not only tread water, but really thrive post-trade deadline is LeBron somehow is coming off arguably the best month of his career, certainly one of them. The first month he ever averaged a triple-double. He's going to win Player of the Month in February for, amazingly, the 7th consecutive February. It's his favorite month of the season, I suppose. And so LeBron, we'll get to the milestone stuff, but LeBron is playing at such a high level, last night included. Last night, 32, 11, and 12, and 11, that he's going to cover up some of the warts in the starting lineup. And then when LeBron's on the bench unit's been outstanding.
Yep. And look, we were talking about JR going to the bench. He's got a game built for that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's streaky, and that's what a lot of bench guys are. If he can come off hot, he can really give you a boost. Rodney Hood, who has his own inconsistencies at times, but he's more consistent than JR is. And I think Hood, he's getting starters minutes to some degree in Cleveland, but put him in the starting lineup, play him next to LeBron a lot. I think he can give you probably 15, 16 points. And here's the thing, because we've talked about Kevin Love. When he gets back, another adjustment. I think Kevin Love is going to thrive with this group because Kevin Love has been up and down since he's been in Cleveland, or at least the first 3 years. Yeah. Why? Because he was the definitive third option.
Let's get back to our top story now, LeBron James. Last night, he picked up his 12th triple-double this season in a win over the Nets, 67th triple-double of his career. He finished the month of February actually averaging a triple-double. To cap it off, he became the first player in NBA history last night with 30,000 points, 8,000 rebounds, and 8,000 assists. I mean, it sounds like the start of a joke. LeBron spoke about the achievement after the game.
I've always prided myself on being a triple threat player. I'm not a scorer, but I can put the ball in the hole. I rebound the ball to help my teammates offensively and defensively, and I love to get my guys involved. And you know, I always look at myself. I don't like to be compared to anybody. I feel like I'm a one-of-a-kind player. I'm a player that this league has never seen before, and I take a lot of pride in that. And I want to continue that, you know, in the near future.
You know who just got really excited, Broussard?
Oh,
I wasn't excited. You know how I feel. I prefer honest arrogance rather than false humility. And that was honest.
At least he wasn't talking about himself in the third person.
That was not being arrogant.
No.
If Michael Jordan were sitting here and you said, man, you were a great basketball player, he said, I was okay. Yeah. That's not being honest.
Right.
If he said, I was great, that's
you.
not being arrogant. That's being truthful. And LeBron was being true. We have never seen anybody like him. Whether you think he's the greatest ever, I've got him number 2. I know you think you've got him number 1, something like that.
Okay.
But we've never seen a player like him. They say the mixture of Magic and Michael, and that really is what he is. He's about 50% right in the middle.
But do you think numbers like this, because we talked earlier this morning, you think he'll be 40,000, 10,000, 10,000
40,000 is.
I mean,
what
that's
does he
impressive.
need to do to get to 40?
To get to 40? Well,
to only score 10,000 more points.
But so let's assume he plays 5 more seasons. That's 80 games a season. So call it, it'd be 25 points a game for the next 5 years.
That's a lot to ask.
It's a lot to ask.
For the next 5. Probably the next 3.
So, but if he plays more than 5,
too.
but 40,000, 10,000, 10,000 is absolutely in play. 35,000, 10,000, 10,000 is almost, I would say, a lock. But go ahead.
Say it does. Say he does get to that point. Numbers like this, or the trajectory that he's on still at this stage, could that cement him, in your opinion, as the greatest player of all time?
No. The only thing, in my opinion, that's going to help LeBron, and the numbers are great, but to pass Michael Jordan, you have to win more championships because LeBron's longevity is unheard of. And his numbers overall are going to dwarf Michael Jordan's on an accumulative basis. But if you have a prime of, say, 17 or 18 years, and you only win 3 titles in that time, that could also be used against you.
When you say win more, you mean more than he has, not necessarily more than Mike.
No.
I'm not saying he has to win 7.
Okay, that's a good
it's not all about championships, and it's not all about individual stats. Kobe Bryant has 5 championships. Most pundits, now a lot of players think Kobe's better than LeBron. Most pundits have LeBron, including myself and you, ahead of Kobe. As great as Kobe is, I don't think it's an issue. Larry Bird only had 3 titles. Bill Russell had 11, but Michael Jordan's better. So Jordan was the perfect combination of winning and individual statistical dominance. And so LeBron will have the stats, but he's got to win more championships. Let me just say this. If he could win a championship with this Cleveland team, and I know that's putting a heck of a burden on him. But if he could win the championship and beat a Golden State team that has I think they're going to have 4 Hall of Famers.
Yep, they will.
With this cast of role players, probably twice or even once, then I think it's a legitimate conversation with Jordan, but not until then.
The reason it's already a legitimate conversation is because the discussion is not who is the most accomplished basketball player of all time. It is who is the best basketball player of all time. And so if we're talking accomplishments, the person we need to discuss more is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, because he's got 6 MVPs. He's got the scoring title. He's got the same number of rings as Jordan. He did it over a longer period of time. If we're talking just winning, then the person we need to talk about is Bill Russell, as you mentioned. Won 8 straight titles, won 11 out of 13 years, not even mentioning what he did in college. But we don't consider Kareem the greatest ever. We don't consider Russell the greatest ever.
Some do, but most
don't. Most people, it's Jordan.
Yep.
Even though he doesn't have the most rings, he doesn't have the most MVPs.
Why
he doesn't
do you
have
think
the most.
It is?
Well, there's a recency bias, but there's also, because of what Chris said, which is it was a great combination of both. It was he appeared to be the best player in the league by year 3 and continued to be the best player in the league through 1 retirement and 2 retirements. And because he walked off the great. Listen, I will give. People think I don't like Jordan. I hate him so much. I think he's the second greatest in the history of the world. Is something. It is also how he ended his career. You're down to the Jazz. You're down. You get a layup to score. You then steal the ball from Malone. You then hit the shot to win. On their 6th title to cement everything, the final 40 seconds, he's the only Bull to touch the ball, and then he walks away seemingly forever. So that's the argument for Jordan. The argument for LeBron is he's better. The argument for LeBron is the
explain. Give me that. Not just numbers, because I've heard you say name something Michael Jordan was better at than LeBron. Mm-hmm. I can name plenty.
Okay, so go ahead.
He obviously the easiest one, free throws.
Okay, free throws.
I think he was a better finisher at the rim than LeBron, even though he's smaller.
And the numbers wouldn't agree with you on that. Their field goal percentage at the rim or inside 3 feet is almost identical. LeBron's
but Jordan was finishing in the best era of 7-footers, of big men we've ever seen, when you could get hammered.
Okay, so, and if we're going to adjust for era, then we also have to recognize that when Jordan was playing, what you were allowed to do because of the illegal defense rules, you could put 4 guys on the other side of the court and make the team go one-on-one. LeBron has to deal with zone defenses. LeBron has to deal with more.
Somewhat of a zone.
LeBron has to deal with more, I would say, more nuanced, complicated defenses. Jordan had to deal with more physical defenses.
Yep.
But so what is LeBron better
I think
at?
Jordan's also had a better post game. Even though LeBron's big, Jordan killed it in the post.
Jordan's back.
I think Jordan was a better system player. LeBron is a system unto himself.
Okay, so
Jordan played in a system. He learned it at North Carolina, and I think that made it easier for him and his team.
But if we're going to use the system argument, then that can also work against Michael Jordan, because Jordan did it with Phil Jackson, one of the 2 greatest coaches ever. LeBron's done it with multiple coaches because that is the benefit of the system in which he was in.
LeBron becomes the system. Now, that's a compliment to LeBron because he's so great.
Absolutely right. The fact that LeBron James has never been injured, the only great athlete that I know of in the history of major American sports to never suffer an injury. The fact that LeBron has done this now he has been the best player in the league for 11 consecutive seasons. That is unheard of. You mentioned he's the only member of the 30,000, 8,000, 8,000 club. He's the only member of the 18,000, 8,000, 8,000 club. Think of it. Take 12,000 points away. He's still the only guy to do it. How about the 25, 5, and 5 club? 25,000, 5,000, 5,000. Here's that list. Kareem, Karl, LeBron, Jordan, KG, Oscar, Kobe, Jerry West, John Havlicek. That's taking away 3,000 assists, 3,000 rebounds, 5,000 points. Let's do one other thing. Let's just cut his numbers in half. Hold on one second. He's got 30,000, 8,000, 8,000. Let's say he had 15,000, 4,000, 4,000. Only 36 guys have done that. Every single one of them who's eligible is a Hall of Famer. LeBron's made the Hall of Fame twice based on his numbers. So I know, think about that. You take half his numbers away.
You're just numbers. It's not just about numbers.
Okay.
If it's just about numbers, I could make an argument for Wilt Chamberlain. Now, he doesn't have the longevity.
Nope.
I could make an argument, as you said, for Kareem. But here's the thing with Kareem. When he won maybe his last 3 titles,
he wasn't the best player on the team.
in his prime.
And he won the best player on his team.
And so Jordan, like I said, the way LeBron has put the Eastern Conference on lock, where we know it's LeBron James, period. Nobody's even competing with him. Jordan did that with the whole NBA.
Okay, but
the whole NBA.
Okay, and I know people like to make the argument, well, and Jordan, they would have won 8 straight. Well, maybe, or maybe.
We never saw him lose. That's all I know.
No, but we saw him quit twice.
Retire?
No.
Or quit?
No. You get to retire.
There's a difference.
No, I agree. You retire when you're actually done. You quit when you can come back. You don't get to retire 3 times. You can't retire 3 separate times.
Is that your definition of the word retire?
Yeah, that is my definition of the word
That's not the world's definition of the word retire.
The idea that Jordan gets credit, by the way, when you say we never saw him lose, we saw him lose plenty. Just not in the finals.
Well,
the idea that Jordan gets credit.
Once he came of age and was ready to win.
Oh, well, I mean, okay, sure. Once he came of age and was ready to win.
LeBron had to come of age and be ready to win, too.
Right, except for that year that he was of age, had already won 3 championships, and got bounced by the Magic.
Because he was playing baseball for a year and a half and decided to throw on some sneakers, some Air Jordans, and let me go hoop.
Okay.
You gonna hold that against him?
No, well, what I know is part of his greatness legacy is that year scoring the double nickel in the Garden. He was good enough for that.
That's
good enough
way,
for that. But
way
we're not
down.
allowed to talk about the Magic beating him. We're not allowed to ask the question, you know, as great as those Bulls teams were, the one thing they never faced in the NBA Finals was a team with a dominant center. Never
Because they
once.
faced them in the playoffs. Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing.
Okay, well, so the Shaquille O'Neal team
They had to
beat
go
them.
through Ewing almost every year.
The Shaquille O'Neal team beat them, okay?
Didn't Jordan come back after getting a little bit of training in the summer?
A little training.
And demolish Shaq?
They then did beat them the following year. But there's a fair question to ask if Akeem Olajuwon and the Rockets would have beaten those Bulls. It's another fair question to ask, would he have won the 3 on the back end if he didn't have the 2 years off? Where you're saying he wasn't... Right?
The longevity argument is huge for LeBron, but this is what I say. Again, I need more rings in his 17, 18-year
they're
prime.
coming. So don't worry about that. They're coming. He just had maybe the best month of his career. He's in year 15. He's over 50,000
There's no argument longevity.
Why don't you just ask him what kind of sneakers he's wearing right now?
Oh, I know.
What do you mean? I'm not wearing LeBron's.
No,
what
aren't they Air Jordans?
No, Jenna. Oh.
Never mind. I had that waiting for like the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I saw them earlier.
They're very fancy.
Thank you,
I will tell you, I thoroughly
Let's just call them
enjoyed listening to
Jordans
this.
for the sake of the...
For the sake of me. I can't believe he's wearing
LeBron's. He's wearing LeBron's.
Back here in First Things First, we're now joined by former NBA head coach and current NBA TV and Yes Network analyst and a guy that I've admired for years and have watched here in New York, Mike Fratello. Hey, Coach, how are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Love listening to you guys go at it. Just don't put me in the middle of that.
It's exhausting. It is exhausting.
It is.
I know you have an opinion. I don't know if you'll share it,
But you guys made so many great points on both sides.
Before, if I may for a moment, this is really a pleasure for me. Like, this is part of my childhood growing up, watching you coach, watching you broadcast, my favorite sport in the world, and we've never actually met. So this is an honor. It's really great to have
you.
You
just
on.
reminded me how old I am.
I didn't mean to do that.
I was in diapers.
You look amazing. You know that.
Yeah, I have a great story for you. Terrell Brandon, one of your better players in Cleveland, you coached. And now, Mike was a hard-nosed coach. I covered you. You know, I was a beat writer, my first beat. And I saw Terrell years later, and he was like, we started talking about you. He said, yeah, Mike, you know, he was so hard on us. I didn't like it back then. He said, but looking back a few years later, he was probably the best coach I ever had. So
That's awesome.
Mike was a great coach, no question.
Terrell Brandon, quick story about him. We're in Los Angeles playing the Clippers. Get to the end of the game. We're down 1. Call a timeout, my last timeout. And as we're drawing it up, I said, you know, T, you here? And we're going to get so-and-so coming off of the corner. And Terrell's sitting there. They get up. They're walking out. And Terrell looks back at me with this, like, strange look on his face. And I went home. I said, come here. What's wrong? He said, I should get the ball. He said, I can win the game. No problem. I got the guys on the floor before they went out, and I said, we're switching spots. He caught the ball coming off the screen on the baseline, shot it, went in, we win the game. That's Terrell Brandon.
So one of the conversations we have here on a daily basis is which team in the West is going to be the best team in the league. So let's start there. As far as beards go, like facial hair, somewhere between Gandalf and ZZ Top, there's that guy right there. His name is James Harden, but unlike those other 2 clowns, Harden is currently leading the league in points and top 3 in assists and the favorite at this point for most valuable player. His team has the best record in the league at 47-13. And he feels pretty good about the Rockets' title chances, saying, quote, "This is the year, for sure." Coach, are the Rockets a real threat to the Warriors in the West? I know they're, a half game up right now?
Yep.
About a month and a half ago, on one of my other lives, NBA TV, we were asked who could challenge Golden State. And I said the one team to me is the Houston Rockets for this reason. Number one, most of all, because of their head coach, they're not afraid to get into a shootout with them. You want to shoot a three? We'll shoot a three. You want to shoot another? We'll shoot another. So they're not going to back off winning 160 to 159 like some of the other teams would do. And then if you look at what this team has done, the improvement. First of all, one team, Harden, leading scorer in the league. The other team, Curry, fourth in the league in scoring. One team improved defensively so much from a year ago. Right now, Golden State is 21 in the league in opponents' points per game. Houston, 11 in the league in opponents' points per game. But Golden State's opponents' field goal percentage much better than Houston's. Most improved player. How about Capella from Houston?
That's right.
One of the guys you could talk
Kevin
about.
Durant said has an easy job.
Right.
You know what? He does one thing well. Knows where he's rolling to, gets to the front of the rim, catches it, and dunks it.
And good defender.
Pretty good job, yeah. And then you look at, they added Joe Johnson, big shot, Joe Johnson at the end. This team is a deep, solid team that has one all-star point guard on the court at all times. You want to rest Harden? You got Chris Paul. Want to rest Chris Paul? You have Harden running the show. Why couldn't they beat him? Only one injury to knock a team out of a chance for a championship. Remember that.
Yep.
Daryl Morey said when he was asked about the fit of Harden and Paul, he said, you know, he's obviously an analytical-based GM, but he had a very basic point. He said, I'm a big believer you add as many Team USA players as you possibly can and figure it out from there. And that's what they did. People didn't know Harden and Paul would fit together, but the point you make is critical. When the Thunder, when they still had KD, what their biggest adjustment that Scott Brooks made and Billy Donovan eventually made is they made sure Russ and KD, one of them is playing at all times. It gives us a great chance to have the best player on the court at all times. With the Warriors, Steph or KD in big games, one of them is playing at all times. The Rockets are doing the same thing. And you mentioned Capella, and this is why I do believe that the Rockets are a real threat. Not a 1 in 10 chance, not a they need Golden State to get hurt, but they could go toe-to-toe with them and beat them. Not be the favorites, but they could beat them. There have been 31 games this year with Chris Paul, James Harden, and Clint Capella play. They are 30-1 in those 31 games. When they have their big three, people forget Capella's importance because of the defensive end. They have been as good as any team in the sport, and that's a big sample size. That's 40% of a season.
Let me throw this out at you. The one, I'll call it bad stretch that Houston has had this year, not like they've had a lot of bad stretches, but the one period that they were a little bit not the super team that they are, who was missing from the lineup? Capella.
Yes.
He was out injured. Yep. But as soon as he came back, they're back on that run once again.
Yeah, and I don't want to put too much into the regular season matchups, but they're 2-1 against Golden State. The last time they played, they beat them by 8, and it was all the stars were playing. So that's a good sample size for this team. But the one, I don't really have a question about this, but a lot of people bring it up. James Harden and Chris Paul in the clutch. Now, Chris Paul has had some good clutch moments, but he's had some bad ones. Even last year, Game 7 against Utah, 13 points, didn't shoot well from the field, and he had been killing it in that series. Was almost averaging 30 in the first 6 games. 7th game, just couldn't deliver. We've seen it against Westbrook in the OKC series a few years ago.
And Harden's had a bunch of bad moments.
Harden's had, last year, Game 6, you think he was concussed. Whatever the case, he didn't come up. He didn't even look like himself. He didn't look like he wanted to shoot. He looked like he kind of froze up. We saw it against Golden State in 2015. So I have a question on that. And then also, a lot of people around the league, as great of a coach as Mike D'Antoni is, what I hear from a lot of people is his weakness is lack of attention to detail. And when he had those Phoenix teams, when they got beat by San Antonio a few times, it was always the messed up rotation, a turnover at the wrong time, some lack of execution where San Antonio did not make those types of mistakes and Phoenix did. Even guys getting off the bench, but that, during a scrum, they got guys suspended.
Do you think
that could come
criticism's
into
fair?
flow.
Let me say this. If there are criticisms about Mike D'Antoni, I wish I had the same faults he had because, 1, he keeps getting jobs. 2, he keeps winning. He's been to NBA Finals. I haven't done any of those things, okay? And Mike D'Antoni does what he does so well. Think about who brought this system that we see right now to the NBA.
7
Do you remember the old Denver teams? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, like this, they're terrible. Watch them. But you know, when you have better players doing that same thing, they look better than they did. He couldn't coach in New York, could he? I wonder why.
Right.
Why couldn't he
Didn't
coach
have
in New
the
York?
right guys.
Maybe didn't have the right guys. Okay,
Yep.
You can mix that thing up, but it's got to be the right mixture together.
I'm giving them a 30% chance to beat Golden State. What do you say, percentage-wise?
They have a chance. And like I said, they certainly do. Percentage-wise, I don't know, but I always go back to this. Let's go back to San Antonio. Was San Antonio on a roll last year against Golden State in that playoff game until Kawhi Leonard got hurt? A 20-something point lead disappears.
Remind me
they
who
lose,
hurt him,
and they're gone.
Oh, Zaza did.
He could talk about that, too. He wants Zaza out of the league.
The one thing and the one reason no one's worried about Golden State is because we all truly believe that when it's time for them to play well, they'll play well. When it's time for them to step up, they'll step up. When they need to switch into a higher gear, they'll switch into a higher gear. They know when they need to. Does Houston have that ability? Do you see Houston getting that much better than they are right now? Do they have a second gear? Or are you worried about, as we always talk about, Chris Paul and James Harden in the postseason?
Let's remember, Houston is so much stronger and better now than they were a year ago. First thing I thought they did well was they added toughness. They added some toughness to their... P.J. Tucker, not a bad pickup because he comes out, he beats people up. Then they bring a guy in like, Joe Johnson.
Luke Sharma has been a good pickup for them
Exactly. And this team has developed defensively, and I don't want to put this on one guy, but Jeff Bzdelik is on the bench right now. And from what I hear, early in the year, the staff sat together and they put Bzdelik in charge of the defense, and Mike D'Antoni said, you have this many minutes in practice for defense. Now, whether it was 15, 18, 20, 22, Bzdelik has made the most of it. They are a much improved defense.
One very interesting note on the Rockets, last thing I'll say on this. They can beat you anyway. They have 2 winning streaks this year of 13-plus games. Micah Adams tweeted this out yesterday. It's unbelievable. Their first 13-game winning streak, they had the 5th fastest pace in the league. The current 13-game winning streak, the slowest pace in the league. So if you want to grind it out and slow it down like San Antonio might in a series, we can beat you that way. You want to go up and down the court like we know Golden State will, we can beat you that way as well. This is as complete of a team as we have in the league outside of possibly Golden State with its 4 Hall of Famers.
Finally, all week, we're picking our First Things First NBA midseason awards. Today, we're talking Best Dunkers. The nominees are Zach LaVine, Larry Nance Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Donovan Mitchell. You can vote on our Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram pages, or better yet, vote on all 3. Chris Broussard, who's your choice for Dunker of the Year?
I mean, if we're talking about dunk contest, I would go with Aaron Gordon, but we're not. We're talking about game dunks this year. Zach LaVine's been hurt most of the year, so I'll take him out. I'm going with Larry Nance Jr. because, to me, the best game dunks are on people. All right, not wide open lane, not a fast break unless it's just something tremendous. Donovan Mitchell has had some incredible dunks, but not like that.
Wow.
Not like that. Look at the extension, and that's over a 7-foot KD, Kevin Durant. So I gotta, just for that dunk, I have to go with my man Larry Nance. And even Chris Carter would admit that KD got dunked on that one.
Right, of course. Chris is very high standard for what getting dunked on is and is not. That was an amazing dunk. But he's not my dunker of the year. I'm going with Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon, we don't watch him a lot because he's in Orlando. And Aaron Gordon, I will give him credit because he has diversified his game to a degree.
Yes.
He is one of the more improved players in the league. But I'm also partial to a guy his size. Now, Larry Nance is a big guy as well, absolutely. But, like, LaVine's thin. Donovan Mitchell is more what we're used to. Donovan Mitchell, by the way, poor guy, has been nominated 2 times in 2 days. Not going to win either one of them. I think Aaron Gordon's right now the most violent dunker in the league. And a lot of Nance's involve an alley-oop, which is great. Gordon, more often than Nance, to me, can do it on his own. There are no bad choices here. But for me, it's Aaron Gordon. He is the dunker of the year in our First Things First awards.
Yes, go online and definitely put your vote in.
Yes,
all right,
Twitter,
moving on
Facebook,
to the NCAA. The organization is under the microscope after an FBI investigation revealed Arizona head coach Sean Miller offered DeAndre Ayton $100,000 to play at Arizona. President Mark Emmert said the NCAA is, quote, serious about making systemic changes. Yesterday, LeBron James weighed in, and he had some strong words for the NCAA. Take a listen.
I'm not a fan of the NCAA. I love watching March Madness. I think that's incredible. I'm not a fan of how the kids don't benefit from none of this. So it's kind of a fine line because I actually got a couple boys that could be headed in that direction. So there's going to be some decisions that we as a family have to make. But I know as the NBA, we have to figure out a way that we can shore up our farm league. And if kids, feel like they don't want to be a part of that NCAA program thing, then we have something here for them to be able to jump back on and not have to worry about going overseas all the time, I guess. So we have to figure that out. But kids getting paid is not, that's not new. It's nothing new under the sun. You guys seen Blue Chips? It's a real movie. It's a real movie. Seriously, it's a real movie. NCAA is corrupt. We know that. I'm sorry. It's going to make headlines, but it's corrupt.
Wow. LeBron not holding back. What was your reaction to his comments?
Well,
Nick?
first of all, I'm glad LeBron is entering a similar phase of his career that we saw Kobe in the latter half of his career, which is, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think, and I don't really care. I'm not going to parse my words. He's got the stature. He's got the confidence in his own voice to say what he thinks. I echo what LeBron says. I think he's spot on with a lot of it. I do think the NBA needs to figure out, should we have a better compensated and a more well-run farm league? Should we look at things to where guys have the option other than going overseas after high school if they want to make money playing professional basketball? The one-and-done rule is patently un-American and unfair, even if it saves guys from themselves. The football rule, where you have to play 3 years before you're eligible for the NFL, even though for the vast majority of guys, your bodies aren't ready. You need to.
That's the difference with football with me.
But it's still.
I think every blue moon, there might be the high school kid who can handle it physically. But guys would get maimed.
But more than the blue moon, there's guys that certainly could come out after their sophomore year.
Okay.
And you're not allowed to.
Agree with that.
And we, of course, as is often the case with structural things in this country, there's a racial component. So there ain't no rule about tennis, no rule about hockey. No rule about baseball. No rule about golf. It's the sports that the poor black kids predominantly play that were like, no. A couple years free labor, please, before you can go make your money. There is that component to it. And when people say, well, they're not, room, board, tuition is a great deal. For some people, it's a great deal. For some people, it's way under what the free market would pay them, as DeAndre Ayton shows, as the entire NCAA investigation or FBI investigation shows. We are putting an artificial cap on these guys' market values. And I want to make one other point about this. I actually think the scholarship model that we have benefits more kids than it hurts. I think it's great that the money raised. I think there are more kids that benefit from the money raised by the football and basketball players on the golf team and the women's sports and
academic departments.
Right. I think there are more winners than losers in this. But that is not the structure we have set in place in this country for anyone else. There would be more winners than losers on this television show if they just said, hey, we're going to take all the collective salaries of all the producers, all the camera people, all the on-air talent, and just say you all get the same. There'd only really be 3 people really damaged by that. But that's not the structure we use. We don't do it where we say, well, it's more fair for more people. And so why there is one place in this country where we encourage and endorse more of a socialistic system, which is everyone gets the same, no matter talent level, it's an absurdity. And the fact that what we are doing is the star football and basketball players are losing out on money and potential ways to pull their families out of poverty. Not necessarily give their families lifetime wealth, but how about moving from the projects to a decent apartment while I'm living the great life at college? We are depriving them of that opportunity because of an archaic model that helps the administrators get rich, that helps the coaches get rich. It's just wildly unfair.
No, I agree, and it needs to be changed. The problem is they're counting football, big-time college football and basketball as amateur sports. They are almost every bit as professional as the NFL and the NBA. We cover them and talk about them as media like they're professionals. The coaches, the administrators, everybody's paid. TV deals are like they're professional. Everybody's getting paid. That money that these kids generate for the schools builds up academic departments. It's the reason other sports outside of the revenue-generating ones, which are basically football and basketball, have the things they do in the teams and programs that they have. I think they need to go to a free market system. Everybody's wondering even if you agree athletes should be paid, how do you pay them? And I admit it's a tough situation to determine how to pay them. I say go to a free market system. And if Marvin Bagley, if Nike or a booster from Duke or whoever wants to pay him $2 million to go to Duke, then let him go to Duke and get that $2 million. And you wonder, well, what with the teammates? It's not fair. If you and I went to the same school in college and a radio station loved you and said, while you're in school, we want you to work for us and we're going to pay you $400,000 or whatever, it wouldn't ruin our relationship. He'd have it. I wouldn't. We'd still be students together. They should have that. It sounds crazy because we're so used to the system that we've had for decades. But when you really think about it, it makes sense.
So for the first time, we not only have this public pressure, we're having the conversation in a serious way. Like there's been an FBI investigation. Coaches are going to lose jobs. Like people are going to be affected by this. But is there enough public pressure that this is the time where they're actually going to do something about it?
I don't think there will be any enormous change. I think maybe the NCAA might open the door to letting these guys make some endorsement money, letting these guys sign, whether it's small time. You go to Texas A&M and the local College Station car dealership wants to put your face on a billboard and give you $10,000. Maybe from that level to Nike saying, hey, man, we want to release a signature shoe for you while you're in school, Zion, because you're an internet sensation. Like, I think maybe opening the door to those types of things. But actual payment of the players through the institutions, that's not going to happen, but I don't think so. I think it's too institutional.
It doesn't even have to happen through the institution. No. I mean, boosters could do it if they want it on behalf of the schools.
Or who? If it's not the
shoe companies. It could be shoe companies that are in bed with different schools. And people say, well, then the richest schools with the richest boosters would always get the top kids. Like you said, Western Kentucky can't get the kids that Duke can get.
And the only way Western Kentucky could would be if Western Kentucky's got a few rich boosters, says, hey, we are going to give you something for it. And I want to just debunk one, I would say, myth about this. Because I get tweets all the time from people saying, oh, my God, of course it's a great deal. I still have student loans to pay off. These guys don't have loans to pay off. I say this with all due respect. Get great at something. Scholarships are available to everyone.
That's America.
Their scholarships are available to everyone. There are academic scholarships, there are athletic scholarships, there's music scholarships, there's dance scholarships. One of the reasons, and I say this with humility, I did not have student loans. I was an elite high school student, was not an elite high school athlete. And guess what? I got scholarships. I got scholarship offers from multiple schools. There were things. Everyone is eligible.
It's hard. It's hard to tell someone just go get good at something, but I understand what you're saying.
But that's the system we have for everyone.
For everything. Here's another part of the discussion, because LeBron mentioned the G League, and I agree. Like, people said, well, when the kids could come straight out of high school, and they need to do, if the NBA is serious, and all these players, Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James, they've all spoken out against the NCAA. If the NBA is serious, number one, you will let players come straight out of high school. And the problem used to be, well, what about the kids that don't make it? They think they're better than they are. Let them go to the G League. You couldn't do that back in the day. Let them go to the G League, and if they don't make it in the NBA, they can play there and make some money. But here's the thing, Nick. Are we as a society, the G League, not for the foreseeable future, even if the NBA makes it a legitimate farm system, it will not generate the excitement or the pageantry that the NCAA does in football or basketball. That's become a part of American culture. Are we ready to have the best kids say, I'm not going to play in the NCAA? Now, it's fair that they get to do what they want, but
It would
culturally that we would lose a lot.
Yeah.
Think of baseball, collegiate baseball.
It doesn't matter.
We don't care about it.
Of course, listen.
And that could become basketball and football.
The system I want would be bad for college sports. It would be bad for sports fans. It would be bad for the average college athlete. But it would be fair. It is. We have to at some point be fair.
It would be fair for the small percentage.
And that's America.
It would be fair for everybody.
If we would like, it would be theoretically fair, but it would only benefit a small percentage. If we would like to systematically change, I have some strong political thoughts on this I won't reveal on the show, but if we want to have a more equal society and change the rules, if we want to put caps on CEO pay and athlete pay to raise up the bottom, I will have that discussion. But until that discussion is had, and until we agree that's the system we want, then what you're doing, which is taking wealth generated overwhelmingly by poor black kids and sprinkling it amongst overwhelmingly non-poor white kids and saying, but it's good enough. You're getting an education, kind of. It's offensive. So even if it would blow up the system, if we want to actually be fair to the system we claim to have in America, that's what you would do.
So the Big Ten tournament tips off tonight at 5 Eastern, less than a mile from here at Madison Square Garden. Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, and Michigan are among the teams vying for the title, but it all starts tonight on the Big Ten Network when Illinois takes on Iowa. And joining us now to break it all down is Big Ten Network analyst Stephen Bardo. Stephen, thanks for joining us.
What's going on, man?
Thanks for coming on.
You guys are based in Chicago, but is it nice to be here in New York for all the big action?
Everything's better in New York.
Wow, that's what we think.
I mean, and it's in the Garden. Come on now. Anybody that has any kind of basketball knowledge, gotta love the Garden.
And they did a lot to make sure it could be in the Garden this year. And we'll talk about what they did to the schedule and what it could mean for the NCAA tournament. I want to start with this right now, your gut. If I told you could have Michigan State or the field, who you want? Not who you want, but who would your pick be to win it?
That's a great question. I'd say the field.
Okay.
You know, even though Michigan State's won 12 in a row, when you get to this point of the season, every team is so scouted so well that you try to take away your first and second options. And if you can do that, you get to that third and fourth option. Now you get Michigan State in a little bit of a, put them in not the best case scenario, but they're still playing very
If I were
well.
to tell you Michigan State, I've got a time machine, they didn't win the Big Ten tournament. Who do you think would have won it?
The team that's playing the best right now, in my opinion, is Michigan. Okay. This is John Beilein's best defensive team. And typically, when you think of Beilein teams, you think of Pittsnoggle and big guys stepping away from the,
West Virginia.
West Virginia. And he's got another one in Mo Wagner that does very similar things. But Michigan, defensively, they are great. And they've got a lot of depth at the wing position. And so they could give a team like Michigan State a lot of issues.
Now, what individual player should people really be watching for to see something special?
I like Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, this guy here, a projected lottery pick. He does a lot of good things well. His dad, Jaren Jackson Sr., was a tough dude, played against him. But Jaren is a very cerebral player and doesn't get a lot of credit for that. At 6'11", one of the best shot blockers in the country, can score the ball, is aggressive when he needs to be, and, he's outstanding talent.
I know you mentioned Michigan is a team you really like right now. Of the teams in the Big Ten, do you see any of them going pretty deep into the tournament? Is there one that you really think has what it takes?
I think Purdue can make a Final Four run, actually. Old school team. They've got a post in Isaac Haas, who we say is a soggy biscuit away from 300 pounds. But, he is a talented big, very, very skilled around the basket with either hand. And what this young man who's dunking right there, Carson Edwards, probably is the hottest player down the stretch in the Big Ten. And so you've got great storylines, but I think Purdue can make a deep run as well.
And Purdue's the only team in the country that has not lost a game by more than 5 points.
Yes.
So even in their losses, they have played exceptionally close games. They don't I feel like when we nationally talk about the Big Ten, it's Michigan State and everybody else because of the pedigree, the coach. Sure. And I think, is it fair to... Are the two best players in the conference, both on Michigan State, in Miles and Jaren Jackson?
They're right up there. But Keita Bates-Diop, the Big Ten MVP, has had a heck of a year at Ohio State. But Michigan State definitely has a talent. Nick Ward, Jaren Jackson Jr., Miles Bridges, Cassius Winston's playing out of his mind, the sophomore point guard. He's probably the X factor for Michigan State making a deep run in the tournament. Very good from three-point land and has a great change of pace. Will remind you of Pearl Washington.
Syracuse.
You said a lot.
Yes.
You
No,
said a lot
I'm serious.
with that.
I'm serious. This dude has a change of pace that's old school.
Okay.
He's got an old school feel about him. And if he's playing well, they're tough to beat.
All right, so typically the Big Ten championship game is going on like as Selection Sundays under, and there's always a question, wait, could the winner of this game change a 1 seed?
Sure.
Now the opposite's happening.
Yep.
They're going to play this championship game this weekend, and they're going to have an extra week off than you typically would have going into the NCAA tournament. Like,
Sure.
how much do you think that will affect these teams' chances in the NCAA tournament? Could it help them? Could it hurt? Like, how do you think the schedule change is going to affect them this year?
I think the schedule change really hurt the regular season because there was a lot of back-to-backs. There were some short turnarounds. I believe Illinois closed the season with 4 games in 8 days.
Oof.
So that's a brutal stretch. But now everybody's calling Mark Few and Gonzaga.
Oh, because they're used to it.
They're used to it. They got to the championship game. And so everybody's calling Mark Few right now, trying to figure out, hey, what are we doing in this downtime? And I think that it's actually going to help the Big Ten teams because they'll be rested. You know, you've got everybody's nicked up at this time of year. No pun intended.
No.
But, you know, so they get some time off. They'll figure it out, and I don't think it'll be bad at all.
Stephen, if you know me or if you've watched the show at all, I am the fan of the underdog, of the dark horse. If you have no shot to win, there's a good chance I am rooting for you.
Okay, all right.
Okay? Someone has to have that
I
role.
got you.
Give me a dark horse in the Big Ten right now.
Dark horse right now, everybody knows about Nebraska, but watch out for Indiana. Indiana is playing very, very well. Juwan Morgan, in my opinion, if Ohio State doesn't have the season that they have, he's up for Big Ten MVP. Had a heck of a year. Archie Miller has done a fantastic job. Watch Indiana this weekend.
At the end of the day, how many Big Ten teams you think get in the tournament, and who needs to really have a strong showing in the Big Ten tournament to make the dance?
Nebraska needs to have a great showing. If they can get to the championship game, Chris, I believe they could get in. And I say right now we have 4 solid. If Nebraska can make that run, it will be 5. And I don't know that Penn State can do enough, barring they win the whole thing. Their big man, Mike Watkins, is a little banged up. I don't know if he's 100%, but Nebraska.
Nebraska's in an odd spot. They almost would have rather been the 5 seed because you could have gotten an extra win. Since they're the 4 seed, they get the double bye.
Yep.
So their first game's probably going to be against Michigan, which is they'll probably be an underdog in that game. If they're the 5 seed and they get either Illinois or Iowa in that first round, that adds a win to their resume. It's a weird thing where getting up to that 4 line might have hurt their NCAA chances.
Yeah, but here's the thing now. Nebraska needs tier 1 wins.
Okay.
So Michigan would be one of those wins, like Iowa, Illinois.
Doesn't help you.
It doesn't really help. So I think that they're poised. But that Michigan team, I'm telling you, they are playing as well as anybody in the tournament. So that would be a fantastic matchup.
Now that the NBA season is heating up, I wanted to talk about another podcast we do at Fox Sports, and that's Chris Broussard's In the Zone. Each week, Chris breaks down what's trending in the NBA and the biggest names in the league. Previous guests include Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaq, John Wall, and myself. So if you love the NBA, make sure to subscribe to In the Zone wherever you get your podcasts.
It's that time in the show when we discuss catch rule controversies. We call it the catch rule controversy time of the show. Remember that Dez Bryant catch that you thought was a catch but was ruled no catch back in the 2014 divisional playoff game against the Packers? The NFL Competition Committee got together and said that this should be a catch going forward. By the way, I just said the word catch 8 times. It's got to be some kind of record. Nick, is the committee getting this right?
I hope the committee is getting this right. We got to see how the rule is officially written.
Because it's not done yet.
It's not done yet, but they are trying to adjust. They are trying to be a little more liberal, if you will, on the going to the ground rule. Now, the person normally sitting in Chris Broussard's seat, Chris Carter, told us 2 things. 1, that this was going to happen, and 2, that he wasn't exactly happy that this was going to happen.
He's as strict as it gets.
He is
right?
as strict as it
the bar
gets.
is high for Chris Carter.
I get it. He's one of the best to ever do it.
And I feel like there's a little ulterior motives. Like the harder it is for people to catch footballs, the harder it is to catch his records.
Exactly.
But so they are going to try to make it so things that to fans appear to be catches are in fact catches. And that's critical. And I will give the NFL credit for this because the NFL at its core has turned into a passing league with moments of intense violence. That's what 2018 pro football is. And there was a period of time where fans didn't know which parts of the violence were legal. Now fans do. Fans have a pretty good idea of that's helmet to helmet, that's a defenseless receiver. So whether people like those rules or not, fans at least know what they're seeing. So that's the violence part of it. But the passing part of it, when you have a league that reliant on passing and the fans aren't sure, is it a catch? Did the ball move? Was he going to the ground? That's problematic for your consumer.
But wait, and it's not just the fans. Broadcasters are confused.
Correct.
Other players are seemingly
Everybody's confused.
Former officials are arguing about it.
confused.
And so adjusting it, Chris, to where, just to quote the great John Madden, a fumble's a fumble and that's a fumble. Where a catch is a catch and that's a catch, adjusting it to more towards that standard, I think is good for everyone. I think it'll be hard to implement, but I think it's good for everybody.
You said it, hard to implement. The more we talk about it, the more confusing it gets. There was a time you didn't really think about what is a catch. You just saw it. It's a catch, period. And now we overthink it. I like that they're trying to change it, but what I saw, and a lot of this is based on John Mara and his quotes about what they're talking about. There still was a lot of vague talk and a lot of ambiguity. I even think the Calvin Johnson, because he said we all believe the Dez Bryant catch from 2014, the Calvin Johnson catch where he caught it, came down in the end zone, and basically landed like with the ball on the ground. I think those are different plays. I think Calvin Johnson, I think Dez Bryant was definitely a catch. I thought his arm stayed under the ball even when he hit the ground and it popped up. This,
you're not as sure.
I'm not as sure because it looks like Johnson could be being slick. Like, I can see why the NFL could be like, oh, he played it off like he's just throwing it down and celebrating.
Or maybe he needed to.
Yeah, because he was off balance. He's coming down. Look, if your hand is on the ball like that and you come down, it can easily pop out.
So this is a great example, just that there will always be controversy and arguments. And I want fans to know this is not going to be some panacea. This is not going to be some cure-all. They said in these quotes, 17,000 passing plays yesterday. When we were discussing the rule, it was fewer than 10 that would be affected by the adjustment. But there's some of the famous plays from last year. The Jesse James play potentially.
And they don't agree on that. Mara said that he's not sure everybody agrees on that.
There's some controversy there. So what I would like two things. One, I would like this. Get rid of the going to the ground component, which it seems like they're moving towards. Meaning, if you catch the ball and have non-football definition of possession, meaning you are controlling the ball, even if once you hit the ground, you lose control for a moment, that is allowed to be a catch. But most importantly, I would like the NFL to go back to this standard, which is the call on the field is gospel, barring overwhelming evidence, obvious evidence that can be seen quickly.
Isn't that sort of what it's supposed to be?
That's what it is supposed to be.
Right. So if that's already what it's supposed to be, and look at the confusion they have, I agree with you. You're 100% right. I don't know how you implement that.
Also, Nick, let me ask, because you mentioned going to the ground. Usually they've had the two-step rule, right? Are you saying, because I think a football move doesn't necessarily have to have two steps. Jesse James made a football move, didn't take two steps, broke the plane too. Like, all of that has to be looked at. I mean, this is...
To me, Jesse James, and just like for me, the problem is the argument essentially has been, and I know it's a little confusing to the viewer, but the argument essentially has been you can't make a football move while falling, which is Dez was falling. To me, his football move was reaching for the goal line.
They both
Jesse James was falling. To me, his football move was reaching across the goal line. Chris Carter's point always is you didn't have to fall, know the rules. And I understand that in a vacuum. But this has to be, to a degree, what do the fans think should be a catch? And unless it's something crazy, let's err on that side. And I just want to remind the audience, when they instituted replay, there was a timer associated with it. It was 90 seconds you could look at a play. And if you could not overturn it within 90 seconds, it was, well, then the call on the field must stand. I would like to see them go back to that. And this is something we see in baseball, we see in basketball, and we see in football. The super slow motion, frame by frame analysis it almost becomes a physics lesson. Like, can you ever actually possess something? You know, because when you go that slow of it, I wish the NFL, and people would say it's anti-technology, I wish there was a maximum or a minimum, I guess the way you would put it, speed you could show it on replay for the refs.
Right.
Because you see it in baseball, it's like, oh, the guy beat the tag, but for a 1/10 of a second or 100th of a second, he comes off the bag. Like, that goes against the spirit of these rules.
Also, are they going to address, like, even the Kelvin Benjamin catch for the Bills when they said he didn't have possession? By the time he got full possession because the ball was bobbling, I thought it was a catch.
Fans
would think it's a catch.
That is not being addressed.
That's not being addressed. But what did you think about that play? To me, that was a catch too.
But that was a foot not about rule. That's more about what you're seeing. The question there was, did he touch his second foot back down? I thought he did.
By the time he had it back. Because the ball was bobbling a little bit. No,
just the fact that there are so many outstanding plays that even you two right here can't. Imagine just a group of guys that are going to have a blanket rule that's somehow going to make everybody happy. It just feels like we're so far from having something.
I feel like
you analyze a catch, the tougher it gets.
I feel like it's a step in the right direction.
I'm Jenna Wolf, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.